Okay.
Yes, so in the last video we were talking about Jung and how much Jung there still is in Socionics, and we mentioned type development, and so we're going to talk about that. So what do we mean by type development? So as we saw in the last video, for Jung, type development meant developing your shadow, that is kind of more the conflicting side of your personality rather than the complementary side. Whereas in Socionics you have the idea of developing your complementary side.
Or actually developing to the other quadrant, which is also development.
Do you want to explain that? Yes.
Development is not, shouldn't be understood as like bettering. It's not making something better. It's just changing within a type.
It's kind of like you have A, you also got, it's like binary thing. Do you want to explain that a bit? Like
it's also because Socionics is a theory that is based on a strict model. It's not, you can't be two types, you can't be sort of in between types, you're one type. And development also works within a model. It's not, it's not that you can develop anything, you can develop particular aspects. If you, I hope you're familiar with the model A. But we have also bite-sized series where we explain the model, so you might want to look at it if you're not sure. But basically you can develop the second half of the model, so it's last four aspects, and because those aspects...
For example, if you're an IEI, so you have obviously NI and FE.
Yep.
So if you develop your that would be your demonstrative and your ignoring.
Yep.
You would have NE and FI. So you would be just ethical and just intuitive. That's all you got.
Because
you have to have something else. You can't just have NI and FE. It's either going to be your complementary side, so your dual functions.
Yep.
So either activating and suggestive. Yeah. Or it's going to be something else, and that something else is unfortunately for some others.
Yeah, I don't know. Some people enjoy it.
It's going to be the aspects in the opposite quadrant, the conflicting quadrant. So if you're an IEI, you're either going to have SETI develop or NE and FI.
Which will make you look like your extinguisher?
Yes, or potentially your quasi-identical, debatable. So
I mean, it's, in terms of just the order of aspect, that would be extinguisher, but because you're an introvert, you're like, the way you look might be sort of in between.
Yes. Which I don't think that hasn't been articulated anywhere else, that idea.
Yeah, that's basically based on our own observations, case studies.
Yeah.
And you can't have both at the same time. You never have like TI because opposite aspects. Because let's say you have either SCTI or NAEFI. Because if you would have TI and FI at the same time, that would be opposites.
Yes.
And that just will break your brain.
So where NI, you can have NE and NI at the same time. That's why an IEI can have NE. Yeah. But so they're not direct opposites. They are just different kinds of intuition.
Yeah.
But the direct opposite of NE would be SE. And that's why you're either going to have as an IEI, which is taken as an example.
It's an obvious one when you go for TI and FI, because for TI is descriptive, it says what it means. But FI is subtle, and you can't talk at the same time. You can't be describing something as it is. Yeah.
What you mean and also not saying
imply stuff. You can't imply and mean what you say at the same time.
So it's either going to be TI and FI for you, or NE or SC for you.
The interesting thing is that even if you have because you're still, even if you have your own quadra values developed, you still are protecting your duals vulnerable and role, and which means that you still are able to see them, to understand them, but you don't use them, and you can't use them. If you start using them, you start developing into the opposite quadrant.
Yes, so there is different levels. There's a level, as an IEI, which is taken as an example, you're always going to see NE and FI, but just being able to see it so you can detect your dual, doesn't mean you're going to necessarily use it. So that's why you can have...
You actually are not going to use it.
Yeah,
so
you're
that
not
is-
going
yeah.
to use it. So if you develop SE and TI, you're still going to see any NFI, but you're not going to use any NFI. That's what development means.
The difference is that basically, if you have, let's say, if you have TI developed and your dual, if you're II, your dual doesn't CFI, you CFI, but instead of actually using FI later or trying to explain it to your dual in FI, you explain it to your dual in TI. And at the same time, because you don't value the aspect, you basically say, don't worry about the shit, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so a lot of theories have suggested that you can develop your role and you can develop, well, let's start with role. First of all, like we said, NE is the opposite of SC, just like NI is the opposite of SI, and that's what the role is. So if you're an IEI, your role is going to be SI. So do you want to explain why that? Why it's absurd that you could develop your role? What does that even mean?
Well, it's the opposite of your core personality. Basically, it's the
Yeah.
opposite of your
So
lead. So
NI is your lead. It's the main thing, the most
Yeah.
important thing for you.
it's
Something you
it's
can't compromise on,
it's
right?
something, yeah, it's something you can compromise on. So how could you go for something that is opposite of it? If you go for something, you're basically doing
You're
self-destruction.
basically- By the way, that would almost be more in line with Jung's perspective, where you could go against your core because you don't really have a core.
Because you
from Jung.
don't have one, yeah.
Whereas in Socionics, you do have a core. So you can't just. Whereas in Jung, I'm just going to bring up Jung for a second. It's kind of like anyone can become anyone else.
Yeah.
In Socionics, you can't. You have a box, basically. I mean, it's the model A. So it is a structure, and the point of the model is that there is a framework to it, right? And then you're either going to be this or that. So you can't
Yeah.
and you can't just be anyone else, you know.
Yeah,
Anyone
because
who's-
even the development works again within your type.
Yeah, so the whole
You
point-
don't change your type, you don't become a different
Yeah.
type, you don't become your extinguisher, you're still an I lead.
Yes.
Just look more like one
Yeah.
because you start using these aspects.
Yeah, and then there's also this idea. So first of all, for some reason, you can develop your role, which seems like I said, well, contradictory to what Socionics is about. But on the other hand, for some reason, there's this idea that you can't develop your suggestive and your active.
Oh
which is
yeah,
what
yeah,
we
yeah,
said
that's a big
before,
one.
Which
Yeah.
is what I started with. We said that I mean, you can either develop that your complementary side or the
Because if you wouldn't be able to develop your complementary side, that means the dualization will never work, that there's no point of a dual, and
Yeah.
which is actually a problem for many people, it seems, with Socionics, that they say, oh, duals can't, it's really, dualization is basically overestimated.
Yeah.
It's just, because how can you,
Overrated, yeah.
overrated is the
Yeah,
word, yeah.
yeah.
How can you be like what's the point of a dual if you never will really get that?
yeah.
Because you always, like, let's say again, being an II, you would always have strong NI and strong NE for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you're literally not going to appreciate.
Yeah, you
what you
can't, because yeah, it just says, oh, dual can do that stuff for you, but why would you even talk? You won't understand each other ever
Yeah.
because you're so weak at it.
Yeah.
And
don't even
yeah, we're saying that's not the case, and we've seen it's not the case, and you, by developing it, you basically get a much better understanding of your dual,
Yes.
because yeah,
Understanding and also appreciation.
yeah, and also if you would have always like II developed NE always, so role of your dual and vulnerable of your dual, so you constantly use the FI, you're constantly using those two aspects. Why would, like, your dual will not understand you half of the time, or at least 1/4 of the time, and then they will not like you another 1/4 of the time because it's the role.
Yes. Yeah. So we basically are going against this idea that you can't develop your suggestive and your activating. That's one thing, and then we're also going against the idea that you can develop your role. It seems to be, again, both of these seem to go kind of against the principle.
Yeah.
Socionics, the kind of the binary idea that you can either have this or that, because you have to. You can't just have you can't just have your ego block. Be it like if you're an ILE, be it NETI. You can't just have NETI. There's got to be two other things that give you personality. So it's either going to be your dual functions, or it's going to be the functions from the other quadrant, the
Yeah.
conflicting quadrant, the gamma quadrant in this case. So you have to have something there, and then to have something there means you've got to develop.
Another interesting thing is that if you develop to your opposite quadrant, you get, like, let's say again I, you have an I and you develop an E, and you have now two intuitions to play on one field,
Yes.
and so they get in a way of each other,
Definitely. Yeah.
and you
Because
get
while-
against your values as
yeah,
well.
Yeah, in a weird way, because while they're not direct opposites
Mhm.
like NE and SC are, or NI and SI are, they are indirect opposites. And basically, yeah, I mean, if you give an example, NI is about having this one thing that you care about, like this one overarching kind of
Well, an IFE is, yeah.
NIFE, yes.
Yeah.
Whereas NEFI is all about like possibilities. What can you become? You can do this. Well, you can be. There's like literally different ways of being NE and FI. So yeah, and so there's definitely, you can see how there's a contradiction there, but it's not a logical contradiction.
Well, it
That's
is.
why you
It
have
is in a way, because if you take, let's say,
Yeah, okay.
NE is seeing similarities among other things, so conceptual similarities, abstract similarities,
Oh, right.
and NI is about clear-cut borders of an idea for abstraction,
Yes.
and those are clearly conflicting. If you see all the similarities, you'll think, oh, this is the thing,
But so
because it's similar,
the
so it must be
problem
that.
is, though, the
Yeah.
problem is that because it's not a direct contradiction, you can essentially, what happens is that your kind of the aspects from your conflicting quadrant that you've developed kind of feed into your base
Lead, yeah,
and
yeah.
creative, and you think that they're fine because you're just basically filtering them through your base and your
Yeah.
creative, and you think that there is no contradiction, but actually there is.
Yeah.
And you, I mean, again, I mean,
You get in your own way.
yes, definitely, yes. I think that's it, right?
For today, yeah, for this one.
Yeah.
We can continue on that later.
All right.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.